on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Got the preview video up a little bit later this week, but it's here. The New York Giants set to take on the Carolina Panthers. Going to be a really busy guy over the next couple of days, so hopefully you check me out. I'm going to be on two different channels tonight. I'll be on Patricia Traina's channel in an hour at 7:30. I'm not sure when I'm going to be done with this video, but as of now, it's 6:25. And then I'm going to be on Bad Dogs tonight for our weekly show. And then tomorrow, we'll be doing the night before live stream. And yes, we're going to have a license plate guy on the channel. So really looking forward to that. But in this video, we're going to dive into this week 2 matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Of course, the New York Giants, fresh off a week 1 victory for the first time since 2016. We have a winning record at any point in the season for the first time since 2016. And New York Giants fans are a bit optimistic. They're a bit excited going into this game. Now, I could completely understand being cautiously optimistic, but as a fan, I don't care. I'm excited. Whatever happens, happens. We'll see how we stack up week number 2 against the Carolina Panthers. Going into the year, at least according to the odds makers, the Giants were a 1-point favorite. I've seen it as high as about 2.5 since the New York Giants won last week. And of course, the Carolina Panthers lost to a team that was starting Jacoby Brissett at quarterback with the Cleveland Browns. What did the Cleveland Browns do in that game in order to beat them? Well, simple. They did exactly what the New York Giants did against the Tennessee Titans. They ran the ball to a tune of 217 yards on the ground. The Giants, of course, ran for 238, which was the most yards against the Tennessee Titans defense since November 26th of 2018, in which they surrendered 281 yards to the Houston Texans. So if you ask me what the offensive game plan for this game should be for the New York Giants, I think it's pretty simple. It may be more complex than that because you have to figure that Carolina will make some adjustments. Obviously, they're going to try to get Derrick Brown in the middle. They're going to try to stuff the line to try to force Daniel Jones to throw the football. But if they do that, you could only assume that the New York Giants may have some favorable matchups. Of course, there's going to be some key players out for this game on both sides of the ball for the Giants. It seems as if Tony could play based off some of the videos that I saw today on Twitter, but I would expect him to probably at least be somewhat limited, similar to the way that he was week 1 when he only had 7 offensive snaps. Hopefully he has more than that because I do see him potentially being a factor in this game if he is himself. And then on the defensive side, we're obviously without Kayvon Thibodeau, who we were without last week, and our other top-tier edge rusher, Azeez Ojulari. In addition to that, Aaron Robinson had his appendix removed, so he will not be playing. So the New York Giants will be up with one of their backup cornerbacks. I don't think they've quite figured that out, who it's going to be opposite of Adoree Jackson, but regardless, it's going to be a mismatch for sure going up against the Carolina Panthers. Last week, the Panthers started to get things going as that game went along. You heard Baker Mayfield talk about it after the game, in which they posted 17 points in the fourth quarter, but ultimately failed to complete the comeback, losing 26-24 to the Cleveland Browns. So it seems like, without getting an opportunity to really watch the game, maybe they were starting to get things clicking on that offensive end. The Panthers, kind of like the Giants, have a lot of similarities from the offensive line. In terms of having a quarterback and a new offense. So there's a lot of similarities. They're kind of working through some of the same things that the New York Giants are from an offensive standpoint. Mayfield, of course, his first year. And there's so many great storylines in this game before we dive further into, the matchups. You got Baker Mayfield, some of the things that, of course, he said about Daniel Jones in the past. We've all seen those quotes where he kind of mocked him and mocked the New York Giants for drafting him. Then a year later, once Odell Beckham got there, he kind of took a little jab at New York Giants fans. And maybe, it's a long time ago. I don't know if that's going to give the New York Giants any added motivation, but I got to think Brian Daboll's going to try. And, of course, it's a storyline for the fans. The other storyline, the Dave Gettleman Bowl. Dave Gettleman, of course, was the GM for both of these teams, and I'm sure he's kind of public enemy number 1 for both fan bases. You got the great running backs, though, that he drafted in McCaffrey and Barkley, as Barkley tries to continue his revenge tour. Obviously last week he outshined Derrick Henry. Now he's going to try to outshine one of the better running backs in the National Football League in Christian McCaffrey. So that's a good storyline, and there's several others as well. I'm really, really, really excited for this week 2 matchup. I'm not sure if you guys could tell, but it feels different for me, at least, to be a New York Giants fan fresh off a week 1 win. I have a lot more hope. I have a lot more inspiration to come on here and talk New York Giants football. And let's hope we can keep the train rolling this week against this Panthers football team. Let's dive into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is the New York Giants ground attack and what they were able to do and why they were able to be as successful as they were last week and whether or not they could keep this ground attack going. Last week, of course, in the first half, the New York Giants offense was beyond stagnant. It was horrible. We all know that, right? We got shut out. They did a great job in terms of making adjustments. They went strong with the run approach. And Barkley, of course, took that game over, put the team on his back. The New York Giants got the win. But what did they do differently in terms of running the football than they've done in years past? I saw this stat on CBS Sports, and this goes to Brian Dable and the offensive game plan. A little small for you guys, so you may not be able to read it, but I'll read it for you guys. Saquon Barkley was the biggest beneficiary when talking about the offensive scheme of the Giants adding this wrinkle to their offense, talking about pre-snap motion in the ground game. He had 12 rushes for 155 yards with motion on Sunday. And in his non-motion runs, 6 carries for just 9 yards. He only averaged 1.5 yards a carry on the other 6 runs that did not involve pre-snap motion. He's already surpassed his entire rushing total from last year when the Giants used motion. And then when you look at the data last year, 30% of his runs, there was some motion pre-snap. On those runs, he ran for 128 yards and only averaged 2.6 yards a carry. Last Sunday, out of his 18 combined runs, 12 of them, there were pre-snap motion, so 67%. He had 155 yards and averaged 13 yards a carry. So that wrinkle to the offense definitely helped benefit Saquon Barkley and definitely helped benefit this New York Giants offense. And that is where it's going to start this week for the New York Giants. It's not a secret. The Carolina Panthers know it, but if you're the Giants, you have the deficiencies with your offensive line. You know it's not going to be a whole lot better because there's so many younger players on this line. They've never really played with one another. And we know that the interior, specifically when it comes to pass protection, especially early in the year before they get acclimated to playing with one another, is going to struggle. The good news is we're not going up against nearly as good of an interior defensive presence as we were last week. That was a matchup from hell. Somehow the New York Giants were able to get out of it, mainly due to the fact that they committed to the run in the second half, despite the fact that they were down by 13 points. But Carolina knows this. Carolina is going to try their best to stuff the box and limit Saquon Barkley. The Giants are going to have to get creative with the pre-snap motion. I expect them to try to use him a lot on the outside, similar in the fashion in which they were able to do last week. But expect the New York Giants to stick to their guns. That is the strength of this offense right now. As I've said countless times leading up into the season, I thought the first 3 or 4 weeks, the New York Giants would definitely harp on trying to run the football as Jones and the playmakers get accustomed to this scheme. And more importantly, the offensive line kind of works the kinks out. I think it's going to take 4 or 5 weeks for these guys really to start to flourish in terms of, being able to pass protect at a decent enough level to give Daniel Jones enough time to throw the football. So expect them to continue to lean on Saquon Barkley, to lean on Matt Breida. And I don't care if they stuff the box. You have to have confidence as a football team with the way that we were able to run the football against the Titans last week and the way that we were able to run block, that Saquon Barkley could carry this team once again this week. I'm not telling you not to throw the football. There should be opportunities there. We saw last week, once the Giants were able to establish that ground game, it made the defense cheat. It gave the Giants that opportunity to hit that bomb to Sterling Shepard. So the Giants certainly will take shots in this game. And the Panthers have some weaknesses in the secondary, specifically at the cornerback spot. I'm not saying they're horrible. They got J.C. Horn, a second-year corner, could be a very good player, but had an injury last year, wasn't the best. And they have satisfactory corner play. But do I think if they have to cheat to stop Saquon Barkley, it can open up big play opportunities in the passing game? Absolutely, if the offensive line could hold up. But the Giants have to commit to the ground game, much like they did last week. That should only help their defense, that we'll get to as well throughout this video. Daniel Jones, got to continue to do what you did last week outside of that one really bad pass, obviously, in the end zone. We can't afford to have turnovers like that. Listen, I know Jones is going to make mistakes. Every quarterback in the league makes mistakes. It's going to happen. But you can't have a turnover from within the red zone this week. He's got to be much better in terms of converting. The good news is last week, the Giants were 2 of 3 from within inside the 20-yard line in terms of converting to touchdowns, something that they were not very good at. They converted about 45 to 46% over the last 2 years combined under Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator. Hopefully that's something that continues going into week number 2. But I think Jones just needs to be efficient with the football, have a high completion percentage, move the chains. That is one thing that the Giants definitely need to improve upon going back to last week. Last week, the Giants were only 2 of 10 in terms of converting on third down. That has to be much better this week. But I do think they'll come out trying to establish a ground game much earlier than they did against the Tennessee Titans. But on offense, that's got to be the deciding factor of this game. Of course, the interior offensive line has to do better than they did last week. And I think they will. I'm not saying they're going to be great. I still think they're going to struggle, but you're just not going up against a guy like we were last week with the Tennessee Titans in terms of that interior defensive line. Derrick Brown is not on the same level. So we'll see how they hold up. We'll see how they pass protect. But I think if they're able to run, it's going to make their offense less predictable. So it'll come down to the New York Giants establishing that ground game. The other thing that they have to be much better in, we saw them struggle in preseason. We saw them struggle in the first game. The punt coverage has been horrible. The first punt last week, they returned it about 45 yards and they flipped the field position. Can't continue to happen. This team cannot afford to lose the hidden yardage. That has to be much better this week. Jamie Gillen was booming a lot of punts, and sometimes he outkicked the coverage. I'll be the first to say it, but you can't allow 25, 30, 35-yard punt returns. That cannot continue to happen if the Giants are going to expect to try to win this football game and football games going forward. So they have to be much more in tune with that. Let's jump to the defensive side of the football. Major storyline in this game that I should have touched upon earlier. I don't think I did. Ben McAdoo is back in town. Ben McAdoo, of course, the offensive coordinator, the former offensive coordinator and former head coach for the New York Giants for the Carolina Panthers. And as Giants fans, we know what he brings to the table. We know what his offensive philosophy was. Well, he was with the Green Bay Packers. People used to call it the 2-second offense because he got the ball quick out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. He then brought that philosophy over to Eli Manning. We saw Eli Manning become a much more efficient quarterback. Didn't take as many deep shots, but he hit Odell Beckham with a lot of quick slants, and Beckham, obviously being the athlete he was at that point in time, was able to break a lot of them for touchdowns. So expect to see something similar in this game. They're going to try to get the ball out quick. Whether or not that's a great fit for Baker Mayfield, that remains to be seen over the course of the year. Baker Mayfield is coming from a situation with the Cleveland Browns where he had a ton of time in terms of throwing the football. He had a great ground attack as well. I don't expect the Carolina Panthers to be able to pound the rock at the rate that they were able to do in Cleveland behind that really strong offensive line. So we'll have to wait and see in terms of how the New York Giants will do in terms of limiting them and forcing Baker Mayfield to throw the football. But I expect them to try to get the ball out quick when they do throw, which is really, to me, the most interesting matchup in this game. Ben McAdoo versus Wink. And Wink, of course, is without his two best pass rushers, right? With Kayvon out and with Azeez Ojulari out. So he's at a disadvantage in his own right, and he's missing Aaron Robinson. So he's really going to have to come out with a sound game plan in order to take on this Carolina offense. It's going to be really interesting to see his aggressive nature. The Giants last week blitzed 48.6% of the time, according to Pro Football Reference, which was third in the NFL and would have been higher than any number in the previous season. Carolina, by the way, should have mentioned this when I talked about the Giants offense. They're going to blitz too. Last year, they were third in blitz frequency in the NFL. Despite the fact that they run a 4-3 defense, they're still ultra aggressive. They have the same defensive coordinator they've had the last 2 years. This is now his third year with the team. They blitzed 33% of the time last year, which I believe ranked third in the NFL. So they're going to be aggressive as well. They're going to test Evan Neal. They're going to test the interior of this offensive line, and we'll see how Evan Neal holds up if Brian Burns, which it seems like a lot of people said on Twitter, will be paired up against him. But going back to the defensive side of the ball, I think the cat and mouse game between Wink's aggressiveness and Ben McAdoo's approach of trying to get the ball out as quick as possible is a very intriguing and interesting matchup in this ball game. Last week, what you saw a lot of the New York Giants members of the defensive line try to do was try to bat balls up at the line of scrimmage, particularly early in that game. I expect something like that in this game big time. I think that has to be a focus in this game because it's going to be hard to sack Baker Mayfield, despite the fact that he was sacked 4 times last week, and we'll get into his offensive line and where I think the New York Giants could try to exploit it. In addition to that, Mayfield fumbled the ball 4 times. Somehow they were able to recover all 4, but obviously shows opportunities for potential turnovers as he's trying to learn this offense, as he's trying to learn the wide receivers, and as he's trying to work behind an offensive line that's trying to work the kinks out. They have a lot of turnover, much like the New York Giants do with their offensive line. But I think there's going to be opportunities to try to create some turnovers, but knowing that Mayfield, in a new scheme, without much familiarity with these wide receivers, is going to try to get the ball out quick, being that it's a Ben McAdoo offense. I think the New York Giants, get your hands up on the defensive line. Try to create a couple of batted balls. Maybe you get a turnover out of it. But I think that has to be a really strong focal point in the defensive game plan this week. Get your hands up at the line of scrimmage, and we'll see if the New York Giants could create some turnovers by doing that. Maybe you could create a couple of batted balls that lands in the hands of some of the defenders, and the Giants could come up with a couple of turnovers in this game. So I think that is something that I expect Wink to try to hammer home with this week on the defensive end. Get those hands up. Try to bat a couple of balls. If you can't get to the quarterback, know he's going to try to get that ball out quick. Obviously, their weapons. What do you worry about? We'll start with Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is a threat. We all know that. This is a guy that caught for 1,000 and rushed for 1,000 yards in the same season just a couple of years ago. Of course, coming off the injury, similar to a guy like Saquon Barkley. Last week, didn't do a whole lot. I think he only ran for about 33 yards, did score a touchdown, was used a bit in the passing game. But we know with our linebackers, we saw they were in coverage last week, that he is definitely a guy that we have to key in on, and he's a guy that could definitely take advantage of this New York Giants defense. Expect him to be heavily featured, not just in terms of on the ground, but in the passing game. The Giants will have to come out with a much better game plan in terms of coverage. Maybe you have an extra safety out on the field. Maybe you only have one linebacker in passing situations to give yourself better coverage. But you have to spy McCaffrey in the pass game. He's definitely their biggest weapon. And other than him, the guy that I worry about the most, no disrespect to DJ Moore, he's a fine receiver, but I definitely worry about Robbie Anderson. You're talking about a guy that could burn you over the top at any point in time, going up against a very aggressive defense that's going to ask their corners to man up. You have to figure they're going to try to hit him deep. Just last week, Robbie Anderson caught a 75-yard touchdown pass, and he is a similar receiver to a guy like Deshaun Jackson. So those are definitely the two weapons I worry about the most, without a doubt, in this football game. And Baker Mayfield, if he has time to throw the football, we've seen it over the course of his career, can make plays. It'll be up to Wink to create deception, to find ways to disrupt the quarterback. The good news is, you look on the left side of that line, Ike Ekwonu, who I think is going to be a fantastic lineman. I was a big fan of his coming out in the draft. He was kind of neck and neck with me for Evan Neal. I preferred Neal. I thought he was a little bit safer of a prospect, but Ekwonu's ceiling is off the charts. Very fun player to watch. When we were kind of scouting draft prospects, and I think he's going to be a tremendous football player. But week one, as a rookie left tackle, had a PFF grade of 41, albeit went up against Myles Garrett, arguably the best edge rusher in football, surrendered 2 sacks. If the Giants are going to take advantage of that line, it's going to be on the left side going up against the rookie, Ike Ekwonu, especially going up against a complex defense like Wink's. I could see the Giants being able to disrupt that side of the line, whether it be in terms of run defense or getting after the quarterback, but expect to see them try to overload that side of the line to take advantage of the young rookie in Ike Ekwonu. Not to mention, Baker Mayfield is a rookie in this offense, and having an aggressive defense like Wink's that is going to make you maybe a little bit more uncomfortable than you normally would be against another defense could definitely benefit the New York Giants. Make no mistake about it. Carolina is going to have big plays in this game. Like I said, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, McAdoo, he's a pretty sound offense coordinator, not a good head coach. He'll come out with a pretty good game plan. It'll be interesting to see how Wink combats that. But I do think with the added pressure that they will send, knowing that Mayfield is probably not the most comfortable in this new offense, does give the New York Giants ample opportunity to create some turnovers in this game. I'm confident going into week 2. I really am. And I was probably going to pick the Giants before the year started. I honestly mean that. That's why I had them starting out with a 2-2 start. Said that before the year started. I think I probably had them beating Chicago and beating Carolina. Carolina is not as bad as some Giants fans are making them out to be, though, at least in my opinion. I think this will be a very, very tight matchup. And as you guys know, if you watch my channel, I am very superstitious. Last week, I picked the Giants to lose. So even though in my heart of hearts, I really, truly believe the New York Giants can and very much could win this football game, I'm going back to the superstition. You're looking at the same guy that wore the same hoodie for four weeks straight as the New York Giants went on a winning streak in 2020. If I picked them to lose last week and they won, I'm going to pick them to lose again this week. And hopefully the New York Giants come out with a win and prove me wrong again. Carolina, 23. New York Giants, 21. But in actuality, I think we got a very good chance to win this week. And if the Giants get off to a 2-0 start, could you imagine the excitement going into Monday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys without Dak Prescott and the possibility of starting 3-0? But it's 1 week at a time. This is a game that if the New York Giants want to start to prove that they may be better than a lot of the naysayers thought going into the year, they've got to win at home against the Carolina Panthers. If you're going to the game, get up out of your seat. Like Wink Martindale said yesterday, I think it was, get up out of your seat and make some noise. We all know that the New York Giants have not been known to be the most rowdy fan base and the most rowdy crowd. Well, hopefully we start to change that culture, like Wink said, and we got ourselves a 12th man this week. Do your job, Giants fans. Make it a little tougher for Baker Mayfield in that new offense with the rookie left tackle to operate. Can't wait to see how it all plays out. I'll see you guys tonight. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.